Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works Finance and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, March 18th, 2019. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion second for approval? So moved by Bueller, second by Lallam. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 2 is public input. Is there anyone here to speak about anything? Seeing none, I'll move on. Item 3 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? Moved by Roby, second by Manti. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 4 is council consideration of resolution number 19-16 requesting the South Dakota Department of Transportation to hire Infrastructure Design Group, Inc. to perform the 2019 bridge inspection services for Watertown as required by the Federal Highway Administration. I'll look for a motion and second for approval. Moved by Vilhauer, second by Bueller, and I will let Heath explain this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This item is related to our Federal Highway Administration mandates for performing bridge inspections throughout the community. That is operated through the National Bridge Inspection Standards Program, otherwise known as the NBIS. If communities happen not to participate in this program, the bridge inspection requirements, we do risk our eligibility for federal transportation funding. And so this is a customary action that I'm sure most of you have seen in the past, where we have taken our 10 structures that we have within Watertown and divided them out into groups of 5 so that every year we are performing a 2-year inspection program on our structures. Rather than doing all 10 every 2 years, we do 5 each year on an alternating basis. And so this go around, I've gotten the paperwork from the DOT giving us a heads up on the requirements of the program, and this is the first step to initiate those inspections for this coming year, is to for the community to select from their pre-approved list of consultants who we would like to perform these bridge inspections. Staff makes a recommendation to go with Infrastructure Design Group and their services. They have performed last year's inspections, and I felt it made sense to roll them in to get this year's done, to have all 10 structures performed under one consultant on the basis of uniformity and between all 10 structures. So with that being said, this, if you look at the cost versus budget, last year's fell just under $10,000 for their services. The city only pays 20% of that, so it's really a nominal amount that we pay for this service at right around $2,000. But that is the recommendation before the council this evening, and if your approval here in the committee, it is on the consent agenda at tonight's regular meeting.
Thank you, Heath. Are there any questions or comments? See none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, did you? Did you oh, we already had a motion. Thank you, though. Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. I did have a motion, didn't I? Right? Yeah, okay. Thanks, though. You can make the next one. Item number 5 is council consideration of a professional services agreement for miscellaneous engineering services with Infrastructure Design Group, Inc. in the amount of up to $50,000 to be performed on a work order basis throughout the 2019 fiscal year. Councilman Albertson, would you like to make that motion? Okay, we have a motion by Albertson, second by Manti, and I'll let Heath explain this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This item being unbudgeted, it's a little bit unique. This will be on as its own action item at the regular meeting tonight, but we wanted to discuss it here at the Public Works Committee level as well, Public Works and Finance Committees. And what this generally pertains to is a contract for professional services with also with Infrastructure Design Group, a consultant engineering firm located here in Watertown. The reason for this contract, or why we're seeking an agreement with this to execute this contract, is to help pick up some of the needs in the engineering office that we're facing right now. with the ever quickly approaching construction season upon us, we've gotten a little bit behind the 8 ball on getting some of our projects out for bid. We are prepared to get a number of them out here very soon, but we've still got quite a few in the hopper that we need worked out. Reasons for the delay or being a little further behind than where I'd like to be at this point is surely just comes down to staffing and forces that we have right now and the inability to get the work done. What this contract would do, I approached IDG to help us with one particular item, and in our discussions it kind of evolved into having them on a retainer type basis that could potentially help us with a multitude of items up to this contract amount throughout this fiscal year. And so how we would envision doing that is if this contract were approved and this up to amount of $50,000 is on a per work order or a per task order basis, the city engineer would be authorized to approve professional services contracts through a task order basis throughout the rest of this fiscal year, not to exceed this contract amount. We have a multitude of drainage projects that need a little bit of design work on them. We have some construction administration duties that will be coming up this summer. Our staffing levels are going to dwindle a little bit further yet here this summer with one of our engineering technicians be taking an extended leave of absence on FMLA leave. So we'll be hurting on the construction inspection side of things come construction season time. And anyway, that we felt that this would be one way to help address those staffing needs. We also have the pending filling of our Engineer 1 position that's still vacant. Have not had any luck filling that position yet. We're coming up on, I think, close to 2 months, I want to say, on advertising for that, and have only received one application. So with all that being said, that's why we felt it was justified in bringing this forward to the council for your consideration to help us keep things afloat and keep the business rolling in the engineering department.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Councilman Danforth?
Heath, did you say this is not budgeted or that it is budgeted?
This particular action is not budgeted, but what we anticipate doing is using cost savings or money not spent on the 212 fund to help cover these costs, and likely not needing any kind of budget supplement to perform these duties.
Okay, because don't we normally budget some outside services, which is this?
In the operating fund, Kristen?
I believe we've...
You have 30. Engineering has 30,000
We do,
for consulting.
yes.
Which is this, right? The same
Yes,
purposes.
a good amount of that goes towards fees like the contracts we recently executed with First District, for example. So a lot of those $30,000 funds are already earmarked for services throughout the year. I think we have a nominal amount left over in there after we pay the known fees of maybe $8,000 or $10,000, if I remember right off the top of my head. But that is budgeted is generally earmarked for the most part for fees that we know that we have throughout the year.
If we had a few months ago, or at least a level of experience with a hired, what is it, Engineer 1 level position, how much would that affect your need here? Would we be still having this conversation?
Oh, had we filled that position by this time?
Had it been filled 6 months ago or 3 months ago with a very capable person?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Had we had a full staff upstairs, I think that would have directly impacted the need for this. A lot of that work could have been handed off onto that individual to help get these projects ready for bid, and we just haven't had that ability without that person in that position.
So to a large extent, this is an effect, an outcome of not having that position filled then.
I would agree with that
Okay,
statement,
thank you.
yes.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Roby?
Was looking through the document. Are the hourly rates specified in the contract? I didn't see it in there.
I believe that they are, Councilman Roby. I
Oh,
believe
it's
they
on
have,
an exhibit?
yeah, I believe they have an
Okay, all right.
exhibit
I
of
didn't
hourly
look at the
rates.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carried. Item number 6 is council consideration of a professional services agreement for preliminary estimating of ice arena operations and maintenance costs and establishing a draft user agreements with McKinstry in the not-to-exceed amount of $12,000. Look for a motion, second for approval, then we'll discuss this. Oh, okay. I'll take a Y as a motion and a solo as a second. And Heath, would you please elaborate?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Mayor, members of council. This too is a professional services agreement. This one is with a company by the name of McKinstry. They are a design, bid, build service agency located in Minnesota. How this contract came to be is through discussions internally with Park and Rec staff, with the Ice Arena committee members, a couple of select members. And those discussions have evolved to where we're at in that process with the Ice Arena, where we're kind of at a critical point where we need some good, solid information and then some well put together user agreements with the potential new Ice Arena facility user groups. In order to get that information to be as accurate as we can, as we want it to be for both the city's sake and for those users' sake, so they can estimate and account for those funds accordingly, we look to seek services from this McKinstry, who have kind of a specialized knowledge in this area. Some of their staff have worked extensively with as these facility managers in the past. They put together contracts and agreements, help draft them in relation to what we're seeking here for our user group agreements, and have a real well-rounded knowledge of how to estimate and what numbers to look for and what not to forget when you're estimating operation and maintenance costs for the long-term operations of a new facility. So with all that being said, we have internal numbers that Parks and Rec staff have put together regarding estimations for operation and maintenance. But again, with these guys' level of expertise, we thought it would be our due diligence to kind of have them give a check off of those numbers and those estimates to see if we missed anything. But then also the second part of these services would be to sit down with the user groups and negotiate a calendar of sorts where they would actually have times of use of a new potential facility for their groups. And what that does is then helps steer the cost that they would also have to contribute for those optimal times of usage that they may want. And that information then gets ironed out in the user group agreements. And that would be the draft document we would hope to obtain from this, as well as a draft user group agreement form that we can move forward with and execute with these groups. In a nutshell, that's how this professional service agreement came to be, and we'd be glad to help answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Councilman Danforth?
We answered one of my questions, and that was, it was my understanding that the Park and Rec Department was going to go out and survey some communities that had similar facilities. But other than the information, did they get what they deemed to be accurate information and useful information?
Yes.
Yes, they deemed it to be accurate. I would say that some individuals wondered whether it was accurate enough for the purpose of entering into an agreement with.
So is the thrust behind this us knowing what our operational cost is, or is it to get user agreements? Because it's, to me, I think, to spend $12,000 simply to do the O&M budgeting side of things, I think it's not necessary.
Yeah.
If it's necessary to get agreements, I'd be surprised that it's worth $12,000 for us to do that.
It is.
Why are we not able to?
Right.
Are they doing some other type of funding that's not associated with O&M costs or something?
Right. I can answer this. Probably I'm going to put Heath on the hot spot. I reached out to McKinstry when I learned that they were being hired by Brookings to investigate and resolve the issue that they're having with their ice arena, which is requiring a $3-point-something million repair. I don't want to end up with that, and so that's how this conversation started. And I've had numerous conversations with McKinstry, and this is the point where we are. We've done our homework. we think that our numbers are good and right, but we want a neutral set of eyes on them to tell us that we are budgeting appropriately. You know, we had some comments from the users that maybe we were underestimating how many hours we actually are going to need staff at the ice arena, which scares me. I want to make sure we're estimating accurately. So actually the estimate is $7,000 for this part of the work after we refined our conversations with them. After the agenda came out, we had more conversations with McKinstry, refining what we wanted them to do. They didn't realize how much work we'd already done in this regard. So they're not doing the work from scratch. They're going to be reviewing our work and making sure that we are appropriately estimating and that we are fairly establishing a cost share with the user groups, because I don't want to move forward without a firm commitment from the user groups, and I want it to be fair for them as well as for the city. So these are folks who've been around that, and they know what they're doing. They've established these types of agreements with other user groups at ice arenas in the past, and they're very knowledgeable, and I want their assistance to do this right. And so the Park and Rec Department is involved in these conversations as well, and they also are favorable to us entering a contract with McKinstry to do this. I do think that we'll go beyond this once they dig into the Brookings problems. I'm very interested to see what they find and what the resolution is there, so that we can take that into consideration in our design, because I do know that their facility has had a premature failure. It has not lived its useful life, and we want to avoid that situation. And it's worth spending a little bit of money up front to save a huge amount of money in the future in terms of doing it right. So
some of this is going to be tabbed onto some design criteria that would be in our facility.
yes.
Okay. Mayor, a couple questions, and then I'll go with it here. But does the ultimate design of the facility and how it's used and where it's located, is that going to have much of an impact on our O&M costs?
Yes, in terms of the usage of it and the marketing of it and how many tournaments we get, that will certainly, if we fill this place to the optimum level with tournaments and users, that will bring down the city's cost. And those costs will go toward operation and maintenance of the facility. If we don't do that, then we'll have less revenue available, and we'll have to ask for more money from the user groups for the ice time. And I think we want to do it right. That's really the bottom line, is bank upon someone else's experience. We have an architect that hasn't designed very many ice arenas. We have city staff that hasn't built very many ice arenas, or anyone that's operated a 2-sheet ice arena with full showers and locker rooms and all that stuff. It's all new to us, and we want a little bit of help to make sure we're doing this right. Does that answer your question? Does anyone else have a question? Councilman Vilhauer?
I don't see it in this, but I thought I saw someplace that part of what they would do is also and try to calculate anticipated revenue which we would draw from tournaments and different uses. I don't see it in this. What we just passed up, was it someplace else? I saw a mention about the revenue side of the equation that McKinstry would be involved in.
That's in the report part here. It says secure revenue through scheduling commitments and estimated additional revenue opportunities in report format for city staff to finalize user group contracts. So that is part of it.
Just to follow up to your question, Mike, I was involved with the Park and Rec going back several months now on this. I think after they had pulled their numbers together, I don't think we had a real strong, secure feeling that those numbers were necessarily I'm not trying to say this without throwing the Park and Rec under the bus, because they put a lot of work into this. But I think there was some question still as far as the validity of those numbers that were raised then by the user groups that were reviewing them. I think this would be money well spent to get a little bit better level of assurance for the facility that we're looking at possibly building.
I agree, thanks. Anyone else? All right, then I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 7 is council consideration to authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents related to the construction agreement associated with the Highway 212 sanitary sewer replacement project with Reedy Construction, Inc. in the amount of $382,055.50. Look for a motion second for approval.
So moved.
Moved by Albertson, second by Manti. And I'll ask Keith to explain this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So this item helps progress us through getting closer to the construction phase for the Highway 212 project that the DOT is managing. If you remember here a short time back, we were able to bid our portion of that work with the DOT, which is a huge benefit for both the DOT and the city for economy of scale, bidding, getting value out of the bids that way, coordination of the work, and all those things. So as of, let me check my notes. As of February 20th, the DOT did open those bids for their 212 project. For our portion of that work, for the entire bid, I should say, Reedy Construction was the low bidder that the DOT awarded the project to. And for our portion of the work, the 212 sanitary sewer realignment, Reedy Construction bid $382,055.50. That amount fell well within reason of the engineer's estimate of $399,634.50, which is fortunate for us because I think the next two bidders for our portion were double this amount. So I was glad to see this 382 number. Anyway, this agreement here is the next step for the city to enter into with the contractor that got the Highway 212 bid. And again, this agreement would be specific to our sanitary sewer work only, and of course not related to any of the other DOT agreements and contracts that they have for the other work along the 212 project.
Thank you, Heath. Anyone have any questions or comments? All right then, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 8 is the 2018 annual report for the Watertown Fire and Rescue.
Good evening. So we're going to give a short presentation tonight, just highlighting a few of the data, things that we've developed for this. It'll be a little bit different than the actual 2018 year-end report, which I've sent out digitally. It'll also be on our website here shortly, as well as anybody who wants a copy sure is welcome to reach out and get one. So pretty excited about our accomplishments for 2018, and so we're going to start the presentation. I think if you have any questions, just feel free to, I think we got enough time to ask them as we're going if it pertains to that slide, and then we'll allow a little bit of time at the end for questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Well, we'll get started here on our 2018 year in summary. Okay, here. Maybe not.
Right click. There you go.
Just a couple of things we're going to go over. Just kind of identifying the hats that we wear at Watertown Fire Rescue. We're an ambulance service. We have a fire service that we're going to talk about a little bit, our aircraft rescue service, our fire prevention service, our South Dakota All Hazard Service. Some highlights of last year, our ISO Class 2 rating, the awarding of and acquiring our new fire truck, and the completion of our SWOT analysis that we did in 2018. Now, basically a little bit about our service. Obviously, Watertown Fire Rescue responds to many different types of calls. Our total calls for service last year were 5,091, and that was up 9% total from the year before in 17. We covered 9 townships, 327 square miles. We also provide an EMS to the greater part of Cottington County, which basically covers 717 square miles in the county. Now, when we talk about our ambulance service as such, a little bit of our statistical highlights of last year. The nice thing about what we've done over the last couple of years is we've identified some new software for our departments called ImageTrend. And what that's done for us from an analytical aspect is it's provided some really great data. And that's something that our last SWAT identified in 2012 is something that we wanted to really identify. So when you look up here, this is our total calls for service for our ambulance last year. It was 2514, and in 18 it was, in 2017 it was 2514. In 2018 it was 2674. This is our Station 1 calls. This is our Station 2 calls. This is our county calls, and these are our transfers. So you can see it went up basically 6% last year from 2514 to 2674. We provide 5 advanced life support ambulances with 38 staff members that are all paramedics. Our EMS crew is very highly trained, and obviously they do a lot of hours of training. Now, one thing that I highlighted at our advisory committee meeting we just had recently is we had 58 cardiac arrests last year. And those of you that know that the American Heart Association identifies a cardiac arrest as somebody that's pulseless or not breathing. And we responded, like I said, to 58 of them. We got on scene, and 21 of those people had already been deceased. So we did not transport them, those folks. We had 37 other people that we transported by ambulance, and 19 of those people got to the hospital with a pulse and were breathing. And I'm not saying everybody survived and left the hospital, but I'm saying that's a great statistical data. That's 51% of all of those calls that got to the hospital with a pulse, which is outstanding. The national average is around that 33 to 36% range. So I commend my staff being highly dedicated, educated, and obviously, let's be honest here, the technology's improved greatly when it comes to EMS in this world. So it's been a wonderful time for us.
Just a few other comments on that one. So some other contributions to that is CPR in our community. Getting everybody trained in CPR. Also, we are sending an engine for support, EMS support on some of those calls, adding extra staff, extra paramedics. The truck company will follow the ambulance on certain calls. They can peel off if not needed or get called to another call. So we prioritize our calls if not needed. But that's extra hands on scene, so that really helps out a lot too. Those two things. And some of the advanced equipment we have within our emergency services is another one that's really helped out. But all those things combined is what we feel helps us get at a higher average than the national average. So,
Thanks, Doug. Now to the fire side of it, the fire service and stats and highlights. One thing that we're really proud of as well is 89% of all our structure fires that we responded to last year were contained to room and content. What that means is we got on scene and we were able to stop the fire from growing any further than the origin of the fire. So that's outstanding. We also have more than 5,934 hours of training in 18, an increase of more than 3% of 2017. 18, we also responded to 577 fire calls versus 466 in 2017, and I'll kind of expand as why that changed an increase of 19%. This is 2017 total fire calls. This is 2018 total fire calls. This is our city calls, and these are our county calls. So there's not much of a change in our county calls, but you can see there's a pretty significant increase on our city calls. And the reason for that is exactly what Doug highlighted on. We are sending that 2, 3, 4-man engine company to EMS calls. These are our cardiac arrest calls. These are our respiratory emergency calls. These are our unresponsive calls. Some cardiac patients as well. That are experiencing a heart attack. That's one you can feel chest pain. And then diabetics or seizures in that some cases. I can tell you this is a very common practice across the country where EMS trucks or fire trucks are going as EMS assist crews, and this is changing the outcomes and viability of patient outcomes. So we feel pretty proud that we've made a significant change and improvement in this area. And the nice thing as well, these people are still ready available to take the next call as well. Yes.
Can I interrupt? A question on that. So if you send an ambulance out and you also send the fire truck, does that a tally for the Watertown Fire Rescue and EMS? Is it go
No.
one on, or is that one call? So it's not duplicating your numbers up there?
No, that will be one call for the fire EMS side and one call for the ambulance, because they're two separate incidences as far as the specific call nature for a fire report and an ambulance report. Yes. Thanks. Okay, our goal in fire services, obviously, from the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, is to get to the scene within 4 minutes or 240 seconds with 4 personnel, 90% of the time. And we responded to 27 structure fires last year, real structure fires, and we basically got on scene 78% of the time on 21 of those. So it's a little bit lower than the national average, 12% lower actually. Our goal is to get there with that, and we'll kind of touch on why that changes when we talk about ISO in a few minutes. This is the NFPA initial full arm assignment. And basically what this means is if we have a family dwelling fire of 2,400 square foot family dwelling home, what they want on scene is basically all these individuals identifying a role in a specific when it comes to the position of a firefighter. We have a RIT team, basically a rapid intervention team. We have 2 persons that are going in for entry. We have 2 individuals on the backup line. We have a pump operator. We have EMS personnel on scene for protection for our staff. Not only that, but people that we might be removing from the facility. So obviously you can see there's a lot of hats that are in this equation. But the NFPA says they want us to be there within 8 minutes or less with all these individuals. So you can see the chances are probably highly unlikely. Okay. Now, just a quick overview over the last 5 years. We've had a 21% increase in EMS calls. So what you're seeing here is basically in the blue is all our EMS calls from 2014 to 2018. Roughly speaking, 5-6% increase over the last 5 years. Our fire calls, not so much. It's been kind of a gradual increase over the last 5 years, where that this last year made it really significant by just the way we're doing business, by 35% increase. But as you can see, it's been a pretty significant increase over the last few years. As of this year, again, 2674 is our calls for service in 2018 for EMS calls. This one here just kind of wanted to highlight the overtime budget a little bit. Over those 5 years, you can see we had some spikes going on in 14, 15, and 16. We were already up to $102,000 right here in overtime for the total fire and ambulance expenditures. When we added we identified in our SWAT that we needed more personnel during peak hours of time. That's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that was more for EMS assignments. And we identified that, and we added one in 16. We had a 22% reduction that year. And in 17, we added one more, and we were down to a 13% reduction. So as you can see, $69,000 is a significant improvement from $102,000 that we were up at our high of 2016. So those individuals do help when it comes to the overtime costs for our department.
Plus, EMS went up about 150, 60 calls in 2018 over 2017. So we even went the opposite way with our overtime, even with the extra call volume. So it's really a good thing.
Okay, for our fire prevention team, we have quite a few folks that are involved in our fire prevention team. Obviously, our fire marshal leads that for us, Chip Primus. We had 500 smoke detectors that were installed in different parts of the city. We identified a couple trailer parks in town that we identified. But one interesting note you could see here, we had a structure fire that occurred at one of these residents, and 7 family members were awoken at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were able to get those people out safely because they had the smoke detectors installed actually by myself and Chip. We're actually at this home. So we feel pretty proud that we were actually the ones that were there to make sure that those people got out safe. In 18, we had a dip in our fire inspections of 18% from 17, and the reason for that was our fire marshal is involved in code enforcement, planning and zoning, permitting. His hats have changed a lot over the last couple years, so we're hoping to improve those numbers into next year. And then, roughly speaking, more than 400 third graders that were involved in our fire safety house practice that we have. This is our new children's fire safety house that received in 2017, Doug. I believe, and it was donated by a lot of folks in town with the Home Builders Association, and it's been a great tool for us to get out there to our third graders. And we're involved in probably 25 plus other different fire prevention programs, but I'm not going to get into every one of those. Our annual report that Doug sent out should identify some of that. Now, our aircraft firefighting stats and highlights. Basically, we have our Station 2 ARF team is very highly trained. These folks are responsible for emergencies for all aircraft and the airport that trains more than 900 plus hours a year. This is identified to meet the FAA ARF Aircraft Rescue Firefighter Certification. 2018, we had 985 coverage calls, up 1.5%, so not really a major increase. But keep in mind, these people are out there a half hour before the flight comes in. They have to stay during the time frame that the flight is on the ground until a half hour after the flight leaves as well. So that individual cannot leave the station until that that plane is gone, that commercial aircraft. Now, we have a great team as well as with our airport maintenance folks. They're trained in aircraft rescue as well. So if we have to leave during a time that we don't have airport coverage times needed, they're able to go up there and maintain that coverage for us as well. So it's a great team practice for us. As you can see, it's a one-man operation, but when we ever have an aircraft incident, we did have one in July last year, and we were able to take both trucks down there, fully staffed with 4 individuals on there. So that was wonderful from that standpoint. Okay, we also have a South Dakota Task Force team. We're called South Dakota Task Force 1. It's comprised of Aberdeen firefighters, Sioux Falls firefighters, and Rapid City firefighters. We train annually in all 4 cities. Obviously, they're involved in many different hats. I think some of you guys have been out to some of our ops days that we've had, and they're involved in high-angle rescue, hazmat, confined space, and structural collapse. Just noted a year ago or so, we actually responded to that incident down in Sioux Falls where they had that building collapse down there. We actually had our task force team and rotational operational sectors on there. So we actually took part in that.
And a lot of this funding comes from Homeland Security for this program. It's a great asset to have in our community, and we're very fortunate to be one of the 4 teams that are providing the service.
We have a lot of grants that we go through, don't we, Kristen? A lot. Okay, one of the highlights that we were really proud of this year was the awarding of our ISO Class 2. Obviously, you guys were informally identified with that here a few months ago, but it happened last summer. We went from a Class 3 to an ISO Class 2. Obviously, this is very incredible for the improvement for the city and the citizens of Watertown and our community. They've seen a direct reflection in the homeowners' commercial insurance and the reductions. We've talked to a few insurance companies in town here, and they've said some of their residents have seen some reductions. Some haven't seen increases, which is great as well, and so some of our commercial folks as well. Just a report card here of our ISO scoring process. We received an 81.99 down here, as you can see. And the one thing that I want to note here is when I talk about NFPA 1710, that deployment and for the deployment analysis and company personnel, this is where we fell down at, where I have the arrow pointed to, showing that 5.46 out of 10 and 6.96 out of 15. Those are the areas that we really fell down on pretty hard, and that's due to the fact we are not getting there in that 4-minute, 4-person response. We're not getting there in that 15 to 8-minute response, and those are things that time will only help and with improvement with staffing in these areas. So a big piece for us is continuing to hold this 81.99 over the next few years.
And below 80 is Class 3, so that's kind of our cutoff. So we just made it by 1.99.
Don, can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
We've talked in our last meeting, certainly some of that will change with a future east side presence, right?
Absolutely.
But what does Compesca do to us in regards to the ability? So the farthest point on the other side of Lake Compesca, what's our ability to get there?
So on the very east side or west side of South Lake Drive?
Northwest side, whatever it would be.
I think we're still in ISO 10 out there, aren't we, Doug?
Basically, to be in our classification of ISO 2, you have to be within 5 miles of a fire station.
Oh, it is. You're right.
And 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant. Those both have to be in place. So anybody outside of 5 miles is actually considered, and because they have a fire hydrant by them, like around the Lake Compesca, they're considered a 2X now under the new.
It did improve, Mike.
So It's a little bit different grading system.
Can we get there on in a 4-minute time? I mean, can you with our
With the
Station
current system out there to make 4-minute response,
It's not gonna
no,
happen.
it's not going to
Okay,
happen.
so
No.
that's always going to be a limitation.
We're
unless
going to always
changes.
be falling down on that a
Okay,
little bit,
all right.
yes.
And granted, that's not a lot of population in total, but it's just still a large part of our.
It's still our
community.
citizens and our taxpayers, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, obviously in 2018, another highlight was acquiring our new fire engine. That's Engine 4. We put it into service last August. We had the mayor there doing our inaugural ceremony that we had. It was kind of fun, actually. She got up and spoke about our truck, and we had other individuals there to identify that. But what's fun about this truck is it's a truck that is an all hazards truck. It identifies so many different types of incidents. As you can see, we respond to structure fires, car truck accidents, hazmat responses, rescue incidences, confined space, structural collapse. Bottom line is this truck is a multi-facet engine. It has a lot of hats that it wears, and it allows us to not have so many engines at the department. So this is a wonderful asset to the department, and we're pretty excited to have that delivered
Right,
in
and
18.
then the other parts is you can go from a car accident to a structure fire to an EMS incident. Has all the basic equipment on for that incident stabilization within the first initial response to anything we have in Watertown. So it's a great
And
piece of equipment.
technology tool on there is amazing too. We have all the latest equipment that allows us to keep our firefighters safe, but also allows us to for safety for the citizens that we go to these homes with. Okay, the SWOT was a really big thing for us this last year, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. We've identified this as something that's really important to our department to really deeply analyze what's going on, and not just Doug and I as the chief and the assistant chief knowing what's going on, but let our staff have that involvement. We basically took almost 6-7 months to get Doug to go through that, I believe, and we had a final group setting. We invited the mayor over, and she got to listen on some of our interesting topics, so to speak. But these were some of the strategic plan and goals that we identified in our SWOT. Obviously, number one is to strive to meet that NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency 1710, staffing and response times, and obviously we've touched on that quite a bit. Improve the ability to provide services, and that's that East Fire Station that we're looking at, obviously, in 2023. We have a planning team already kind of assembled with the department. We're inviting Heath to help us out with some of those things as well from the design aspect, because he brings a professional plan there, identifying zoning capabilities as far as where we're going to identify this. Increase the number, quantity, and quality of applicants as far as people applying at our department, and marketing for more of those applicants. And we've had a little improvement here just this last go around with some of that. Expand our training, organize and improve some of those overall training pieces at our department. Firefighter safety. Obviously, cancer is really a big thing. And accountability equipment in the PPE, cancer prevention, like I said, physical fitness are really important. And then the last one is really a big one, obviously, is maintaining the current ISO Class 2. This is a map that we really like to show here. This identifies a 3-station concept again. Station 1 being the 129 First Avenue Northwest, the Station 2 being the 500 Golf Course Road, and the Station 3 being that 20th Street, First Avenue Southeast area, okay? And the green, this here represents the 1 mile, this represents 2 mile zone, buffer zone around the city. So as you can see, with all 3 stations, we basically have a pretty good coverage of the whole city, and each one of these would be able to get there within a 4-minute response. So if you look at Station 1, of the 2,674 ambulance calls, EMS calls that we had, Station 1 would have had 1,546 last year, or 57.8%. Station 2, out here at 500 Golf Course Road, would have had 20.49%, 548. And Station 3, the projected station that would have been out there would have been 580, or 21.69. And the main station usually always receives most of the calls in most of the cities across the nation that we know of. So this would be a great breakdown to take half of those calls away and put them at another station. And also, from an EMS standpoint, is we're going to get there 4 minutes or less for most of these major emergencies that we're going to. And one other thing before I end is, when we talk about Aberdeen to Watertown on EMS calls, we shared with our advisory committee that Watertown is actually doing more EMS calls than Aberdeen in the last 2 years, I believe, right, Doug? I think we're about 200 more now, so I think that's probably a little to do with transfers and stuff, but ultimately we're pretty comparable, and they do have a 3-station concept with 15 staff members there each day. So, questions or comments for you guys?
Thank you. I didn't introduce you guys. We have Chief Doug Kranz and Assistant Fire Chief Don Rowland, and thank you very much for this report. This 2018 was a fantastic year for the fire department. Let's give them a hand. Anybody have any questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer?
I know with the next few months, we're going to be talking about budget again for 2020, I guess, not to put you guys in the spot, but just as far as a wish list that you may be thinking about, that we're going to hear about eventually, or anything you care to comment about?
I think one thing we would like to work towards is at least adding one more staff to try and help with support of 1710. Both those parts in the ISO, the deployment and the company personnel, it will just help on those areas. Also, every firefighter that we get closer to 1710, we have better outcomes on fire and stuff, because there's less job tasks per individuals, and you're able to get the task done without. So every firefighter we add is going to improve the outcomes of everything we do. So,
And overtime reduction too, Glenn, as well.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll continue to see quite as much. I don't know how that will affect the future, but every time we've added a staff, we've decreased overtime in the last 2 years. One being 11%, one was 20 something.
Yeah.
So I guess that's our main goal for 2019, and also trying to identify a building site for the East Fire Station, as well as kind of a block footprint of the size of it, and that's all we'd really like to do this year on the East Fire Station. We've got direction to look at city lands and stuff to see if it'll work on city land. So our goal is to take this spring and really try and make sure some of that land will be compatible to an East Fire Station. So,
Councilwoman Manty?
Good job, you guys. I have a couple comments or questions. Is there any way to keep Chip from meeting himself, coming and going? And does it help that the fire or the smoke detector program goes on, with other firefighters? But I met with him in terms of safe housing, because I have a lot of, mobile homes, and I have a lot of older homes, in my ward. And so he barely, it was one of those things where we kind of talked about how could we fit all of this together to make sure that everything could be covered. But, how do you get to one thing when you're already requested for new construction? Do you see what I'm getting at?
that is a good point.
And so, I know you guys can fill in, and you've come to some of my neighbors' houses and helped them with things, and stuff like that. But that is a concern for me, because that's how landlords are getting away with not having, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, and putting snow on your fire if you have frozen water, but that's the kind of stuff that if we had more ability to get to those places.
Yeah.
I don't know the complete answer, but maybe you guys could talk about that amongst yourselves. Oh, you don't have to do it here. But talk about it at the station or at a meeting.
Well, I can tell you that you are exactly correct. We do get a lot of value with the fire marshal position on the front end of things as businesses are being open and built, eliminating a lot of that inspection process when they're coming through, when it's already been approved by the fire marshal. But we're losing on inspections. We're also losing on pre-plans, which is more of a departmental function, not a fire marshal function. But just getting into a building, identifying all the hazards before it's getting on fire. We struggle getting out to those things, and also some of the small small inspections and smoke detectors and stuff. So I think if we get to a point, our staff, our firefighters, if we can add a staff, it would help us support some of those smaller daily functions, doing pre-plans and stuff, because we get another person at the station where we can go out and do our pre-plans and help take some of that off the fire marshal's plate. So I think it would help support it, because if we were fortunate enough to add a staff, it'd be utilized in many different ways without the daily duty. So
Good,
Yeah.
thank you. But so I wanted to make sure that was on an agenda in some meeting somewhere, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller, did you have?
Yeah, just quick, out of curiosity more than anything, the Station 3 that you're proposing, what kind of equipment would you put in there? I mean,
well, we would have a fire EMS based building. So we would have an engine. We would also have an ambulance, possibly a support vehicle or a brush truck, depending on. So those would be up to four pieces of equipment: a fire truck, an ambulance, a brush truck, and a support vehicle, like a Suburban or just a daily service vehicle.
Our current fleet that we have right now, Bruce, we would have enough to move out to those places, though. Yes.
Yeah, we don't believe it would cost us any equipment
Just move things
other
around.
than the normal rotation. So,
thank you.
Councilman Danforth?
Mine's more of a comment and an opinion, but, I look back, I've lived here since 1984, and I think the first largest improvement that I've seen in Watertown Fire Rescue was when we put in Station 2. For many, many years, we really hadn't done much, and I think that was an extremely large move forward for us. I think when I worked with you gentlemen in your department back in 2012 and had the opportunity to do that, you guys have come so far in regards to the quality of information and other things that you've done, and I can see where we were 7 years ago and where we are now, and it's excellent, and you guys have done a great job. But I really do believe the next and probably the largest piece to our puzzle is going to be the East Station. I think that East Station needs to take a fairly high priority within the community, because it's not like it's a nicety. It is going to affect lives, and it's going to affect property. And your numbers and your detail that maybe we didn't have in 2012 very easily, we have today that shows that. And I just think that we are going to have to, come this next budget season, we're going to have to sit down and we're going to have to determine where that priority is, because I think it's very important. We talk about quality of life and what we do for our community. That's a huge step for us. It's a big piece of the puzzle. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Item number 9 is old business, and item A is update on the DOT grant application and proposed funding for the long-range transportation plan. And Heath, did you want me to, well, we may have a motion that comes out of this update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the DOT office that manages this program reached out to me this week and let me know that they could afford some partial funding to us for an update on our long-range transportation plan. If you remember from the application we recently submitted, I had an estimated $200,000 cost for an update on our plan. The program is an 80-20 split. I put in there a 25% participation, so a $25,000. My numbers aren't adding up there, right?
50.
A $50,000 cost share from the city, and in their discussions with me, what they indicated was that my $200,000 they thought could come in a little less for a full-blown update. They had recently done City of Aberdeen at a cost of about $170,000, and the City of Brookings a few years prior to that at about $160,000. But what they came forth with was an offer of $85,000 towards our study. That would mean that the city would have to cover the cost of the remaining funds of up to, I'm guessing, about $170,000. So essentially they're meeting us halfway if you look at $170,000 cost for the study. So I wanted to pose that to the council and, potentially decide yet tonight or at your leisure whether we want to proceed with this. They did ask for a verbal commitment by the end of this week. If we do not accept, they would like to take that money out to another community for another application that was submitted. Just a little bit more background information on what they did receive. They had 5 applications. We are one of 3 that they're entertaining an award for. The 2 others that had higher priority were brand new studies, not an updated study. But ours fell into that third place rank. And given we have a current study and it is an update, it didn't fall quite as high as the other 2 did.
And then there are 2 others. Were those updates as well?
I believe those were more targeted corridor studies, so they fall a little lower on the rankings. But if we were not to accept this $85,000, they would likely extend it out to one of those other applications for a corridor type study.
Okay, and if we don't accept this, we can apply again next year and hope that we could get some more participation. We might have more competition, we might have less competition, could get more money if we wait, but there's no guarantee. So basically it's about a 50-50 share with a grant of $85,000 that they're offering to us. And I don't know if anyone wants to make a motion about accepting that. It wouldn't be official because this is the committee, but we could then give that information to Heath to take to the DOT. So. Sure. Yeah.
How critical is it for us today? I mean, for this year, set the dollars aside. How critical is it for us to have it today versus a year or 2 years down the road?
It's a good question, Councilman. Madam Mayor, I guess in my opinion, it does make a great fit as we're wrapping up our comprehensive land use plan. We've got a few-year-old study now on our pavement management system data. The sooner we get this plugged in, the better. Now, would it be a complete detriment to wait a year? No, it wouldn't. But given the level of funding they're providing, if we wait another year, it is kind of a crapshoot on whether we get any more funding. It all depends every year on who applies and how those applications rank. Coincidentally, nobody wants to hear this, but had we applied last year, we would have got full funding because there weren't hardly any applications turned in. If we were to apply again next year, they might have 7 applications instead of 5, and might get less even, less funding yet. So it's really one of those things where I can see the need to have it done now. Are we in dire straits if we don't do it this year? No.
We are having development applications in areas where we haven't got an updated transportation plan. And so it would be very helpful to address that. Councilman Roby?
I was just going to say, I think the timing's probably, we move forward now. I look at what's going on specifically, I'll allude to 212, to both segments coming through. Other than 212, there's other projects out there that we're working on, and if we don't, I guess, if we make decisions on those, we're making them with old information. So.
Right. Would you like to go ahead, Councilman Vilhar.
I will make the motion to move forward with the 85,000, just to get a discussion a little more on the table.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Danforth. Any other discussion? Councilman Vilhar?
How would we, the 50,000 that we were anticipating last go around, or last time we discussed this a couple weeks ago, where were we going to, where was that coming from out of the budget, and then nextly, where the 85,000 come from?
Great question, Councilman Vilhauer. Madam Mayor, so that funding would be allocated in this upcoming budget cycle. If you recall, the DOT would run this study fully in-house and pay for the study up front, and we would reimburse them our share at the completion of the study, which they would anticipate being the middle of next year. So we could budget for our hard costs that will incur in 2020 during this next budget cycle.
Councilman Danforth?
Keith, does it make, I'm in agreement that now's the time. Let's plan for it in 2020, and let's do it. It's 35,000 more than what we had, approximately, than what we had talked about last. But does that play, is there any favor in the future where when we apply for this, where they'd look back and go, they paid half of it versus other communities that may have paid none or 10% or 20%. Is there ever a factor that's considered?
I haven't ever seen their formal rubric on how they score these projects. I suspect that that's not a formal item on there. Now, whether that weighs into consideration in their minds when they're assessing those, I would be guessing to say that it does. The other formalities that they do look at, like I mentioned, whether it's a brand new study, whether it's a full-blown community-wide study, or whether it's a corridor type study or more specialized. They do rank them in hierarchy according to those criteria. They also do know, they helped fund our pavement management system study in 2016, and then also helped perform our 2005 study as well with these funds. And so they have a record of that, and they acknowledge, where this money goes each and every year. But that is a good point. Yeah, from a common sense standpoint, if that were to come into play, you would think, yes, that does weigh in. But whether it formally does on their scorecards, I couldn't say for certain.
Other questions or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Is there any other old business anyone wants to bring up?
Madam Mayor? Sorry.
Who said that?
I have a question.
Councilman Danforth?
A number of years ago, and I'm saying maybe 4 years probably or 5, there was a plan in place to replace or rework 11th Street from the Votech four-way stop down to Highway 212. And I think there was some infrastructure work that was being planned on, and so then something set that aside for a while. What is the status of that whole project? I know it had something to do with flood.
Right. We were hoping that we would be able to reroute the floodway down 11th Street by design and create that as a corridor because we have a lot of homes in the floodway on Roby Creek in that area, and we weren't able to do that successfully. So the project has less of a priority since we aren't accomplishing that, and that was kind of the urgency of it because FEMA had just given us this expanded floodway with lots and lots of houses in it, and that's a really bad thing for if your home's in a floodway and it burns down, technically you cannot rebuild it. If it's in a floodplain, that's a different situation. I don't want to scare anybody, but the floodway is a very serious part of the floodplain, and it's that narrow part where the high velocity water flows. And we wanted to move that into the street so that we would have to close the street in a flood, but then it would pass and we'd open the street back up and no big deal. Where it's going through neighborhoods and wiping out houses, that's a different story. So the road needs some work, yes. That design was done before we had done our pavement management system, and it just didn't rank with the pavement condition up at the top. But I don't know that we know where that is, if Heath or Colin knows where that lies in terms of priority in looking at the pavement management system. We did our entire city's streets, all of them, and they're all in order, and nobody can say off the top of their head where anyone lies.
The reason why I bring that up, there were a couple things with that is during those discussions, certainly one of the needs was the flood control or the management of that and trying to get that resolved. But, there's some areas that are just very bad there. That four-way stop south of the Votech is terrible, and it has been for several years. And with previous Mayor Thorson, one of the things we talked about there was we don't want to put too much money into that because this other project was likely coming at that time. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're going to have to take a look at that. Certainly that intersection is terrible and has been for years. But, the other thing that was talked about with that, and not that it justifies it completely, but it does assist in the justification, is that street from 212 is kind of the gateway to Lake Area Tech and the high school in the arena. And it's in tough shape. And so I didn't know where that was, that project. Maybe that's something that we have to take a look at as we're coming into next season maybe or something as to where that sits on a priority. But certainly
Okay,
some of
we'll
those
get it.
places are going to have to get taken care of versus just some patchwork as far as some of the potholes and stuff.
Right, those are really good points, and we'll, I'm sure Heath will make a note to check into that and see where that one lies in terms of priority. Any other old business?
I had one item, Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
Give a brief update. Councilman Roby had asked maybe a month ago now on the traffic study in relation to 212 and the Phase 2 impacts. We do have a final draft we've recently received. After that last meeting with this was discussed, we reached out with a consultant. They gave us a final draft at that point. We had a round of revisions that we sent back to them, as well as the DOT through their review of that report. Also had a few questions that they wanted further clarified in the report. So Colin and I will be reviewing that final draft and bring forth that version to the council here sometime in the near future as far as the findings.
Okay, thank you. Anything
Mayor?
else under old?
Since we have a few minutes here, thought I would just give a brief update on some research that we did after our previous discussion on the full-service on-sale restaurant alcoholic beverage license. Say that 3 times fast, but and Dan, our newspaper reporter here, wrote an article about it, and we did call the communities that he had reported on to confirm those prices. But the city of Sioux Falls, their fee is set at $260,033. The city of Brookings and Aberdeen are both $100,000 even, and Rapid City is $295,000. So, just reporting back what was requested of me to report back on, and was wondering if there was any additional thoughts on where the council might want to go with that dollar amount.
Anyone want to weigh in on this? Now we have the licenses that the city can sell and never has, which are slightly different. They come with some extra baggage that the market licenses don't. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Correct, yes. So the full service on sale alcoholic beverage license requires that the holder of the license sell their gross revenue for food sales must be more than 60% of their total revenue. So essentially it's geared towards restaurants, not bars, and they have to verify that every year, submit documentation to the city. And to date, since we've instituted this 10 years ago, nobody has purchased a license from us for the $205,000 that it was set at in 2009. But as I explained last time, that resolution has expired. And so that's what prompted this discussion, is that now we are allowed to reduce that fee or change it or increase it if we choose to no less than the number of citizens at the last federal census. So I think it's 21,342, I believe is the number.
So we're currently selling them for 220
205,000.
or 205.
Correct.
We could go. We set that, and we could go as low as 22,000 or so.
Correct.
That's up to us, and it isn't apples to apples the same as the private.
All right. Yep. So the other licenses that liquor establishments or restaurants, anybody that serves liquor in town currently are operating under our full alcoholic beverage license, liquor licenses, so they can sell 100% liquor if that's what transpires. So there's no restrictions as far as food sales or anything like that. Now there may be establishments in town that actually meet that threshold, but regardless, the license that they hold does not have that restriction on it. So, of course, I think that license is always going to be more valuable in the market because there are no restrictions. And so I did have a brief discussion with our economic development director, Chris Shokin, last week about this. And, there may be some advantages to us from an economic development standpoint of having a reduced fee that may allow a restaurant that may otherwise not be able to afford the current fair market value in the market to come into town for a lesser amount, assuming it's a restaurant, not a bar.
So once they, if they theoretically had purchased that from the city, could they sell it?
Yes, there is a process that state law lays out that if somebody had purchased one and somebody else comes along looking for that same license, they can purchase it from us if the current holder of that one license is not willing to sell for the rate that we've set for that license.
Could they sell it for less than the
Yeah, I
city?
suppose.
If they wanted to maybe upgrade to a full license that they weren't able to purchase for whatever reason, and then they wanted to change over and buy one of the full service ones where there's no limit on the alcohol sales, and then sell off the one they'd purchased from the city for, a little bit less than the city would charge just to get it sold.
Yes, they could do that.
That's something they could do. Anybody else? Councilman Bueller?
Just so I understand once again, well, first off, I want to ask, has anybody had any kickback, any feedback from any liquor license holders? I'd be curious to what kind of concerns have arisen since the last time we had this discussion. But, I think the other one, the full on-sale license, am I right in understanding that if somebody has one of these for sale, then that's the first place that if somebody wants to get one of these, they have to go to that for what that value is? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So would a similar circumstance would be the same thing if we do the full service on sale adult beverage and hair care license as well? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's a long name.
Yeah.
It would. So they'd go through the same process for
Yes.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I thought, I don't know.
deer
I
in
didn't
the
pay real
headlights.
close
What the
attention to the legislature this session. So it could have been. You never know.
Okay. And then, so whatever price that is at, if just like the other liquor license, it would be at that price. They'd have to pay that price if one is available.
Correct.
And my last question is, what's the limitation on numbers? What would be looking at? No limitation
No
on these,
limitation.
as opposed to the full on sale, which
Correct.
is what, 26?
26.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman Danforth?
I got a few questions first. How many do we currently have? How many licenses are the full service license, whatever it is?
26.
26, that's the number. Well, I did receive a call and had a very interesting conversation, and it provided a lot of thought. But I believe, did you say Aberdeen and Brookings was 100,000?
Correct.
Okay. Well, number one, we're well out of being competitive with them at their levels. But I believe that if we were to go down to that level and be competitive with those communities, I think we would see a shift of what would be the current licenses, that if somebody held one today and the new license was a better value for me because I do the 60%, I most likely would get that license and I would sell my other one, and there would be ample opportunity to sell the other one the way it sounds for really a different use. It's lottery use,
it
it's
is.
bar use.
Right.
They're completely different. I think we should make the shift to be competitive with Aberdeen and Brookings, and I think what we'll see is we will see that shift. I think we will see people buying these licenses. We're going to see a license up for sale, and so we're going to see a whole different economic twist to what gets developed, what comes into town or gets established here. I think that's the way that we should go.
It frees the market up.
Yeah.
Right now, obviously, we're not competitive when we haven't sold a single one in the entire time. And I don't know if Brookings and Aberdeen have, at half the price of ours, have they sold?
Aberdeen has 2 or 3 active, and to that point, Buffalo Wild Wings in Aberdeen holds one of these types of licenses versus the full service, versus the full on sale license.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else have a, Councilman Roby?
I tend to agree in principle what Mike's talking about. I haven't done an analysis on this, but if we do this, my concern was investment previous license holders have made, and does it dilute their investment? And I think there's enough of a differentiation that, 60% of your revenues, that's the number, right? That's a lot. So I don't really know if there's a way to game the system, so to speak. If you get the lesser cost license and you're only selling 10% of your food, you're going to get caught and you'll lose your license. Correct, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct.
So again, the idea of gaming the system's hard to do. Therefore, I'm not sure, as my concern was last meeting, this will dilute the value of the existing license holders.
Any other questions, Councilman Albertson?
I think it does send a different message when you're talking about the 60% of food as opposed to you can have the other things. Can you have lottery with the one that we're talking about now?
Yeah, that'd be a separate license.
Okay.
Yes.
So that wouldn't have any bearing on that. But I think it does make a difference. I think it would be somewhat more palatable to those who have paid the 210,000, maybe.
Councilman Danforth.
Dan's question of can you have a lottery, does it come with video lottery? You said you'd acquire the separate license.
It would be a separate license
Okay.
for video lottery.
I don't know how this whole video lottery thing works as far as revenues go, but does that revenue then fall into the whole bucket? Or is it separate regarding this, to calculate your 60%?
That is a good question that I will have to report back to you the answer of.
Homework assignment.
And we don't have to have a haircut license like Bruce.
As far as I know.
But Don, were you saying then, Don, that you kind of agree that it really isn't going to have a negative effect? It might have a little, but if there's people that are wanting that full service, it opens up a lot of doors for those people.
Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction last time this came up was that's unfair to those that have invested in a license because it'll immediately dilute the value of that license. But I think the way this, as you think it through, if I was to switch to this license and we charged on par with Aberdeen and Brookings at $100,000, I got to sell 60% of my food. If it gets checked every year, again, that's a check and balance. I think that can hold the value of the full on-sale liquor license. So if I just want to have a bar, this one doesn't work for me. And if I have a license that is just a bar, there's enough differentiation. I guess I'm pretty comfortable we're not going to see that dilution.
Right. Anyone else? Well, thank you.
So, kind of gauging the conversation here, if we brought forth a formal resolution to set the fee at $100,000, of course, it would still be up for debate and discussion at that time, but should we move forward with that then?
Anybody object to that?
I don't object, but I do see myself talking to some proprietors and just getting their input on that.
I would encourage that. Yeah.
Hopefully at that point, Don and Mayor, we would get people here that are telling
Right,
us the situation versus,
And I think people want more restaurants that have alcohol available but are primarily restaurants. I hear that all the time. According to retail strategies, we have ample market here. We can support more restaurants, and that would be added incentive for getting some more restaurants in town. So that would be good.
The 100,000, is that what, right?
Yes.
Could be just a placeholder for discussion as well.
Correct.
You know,
Yes.
Just get something on the agenda for further discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's a good plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Is there any other old business or new business? See none, we will not be going into executive session tonight, and so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Alalem, second by Bueller. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We'll be back at 5:30 for the council meeting.
Where they're redoing or rebuilding areas that